Let's go about the story, the drama by Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice. This is in very easy English. I hope you can enjoy and can understand everything that I say in this video. So let's get started. The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. At the time when the city of Venice in Italy was rich and famous, one of her chief citizens was a merchant. He was Antonio. He was well known for his kindness. He had many friends, and among them there was a young Venetian nobleman. He is Bassanio. Although he came from a noble family, Bassanio was poor and spent more money than he could afford in order to live the kind of life he liked. But Antonio loved him and lent or gave him money whenever he needed it. For the merchant of Venice was a rich man. He owned many valuable ships which traded with foreign countries. Now Bassanio loved a rich and noble young lady. Her name is Portia. Her father had recently died and he left her all his money. So she is so rich, she is so beautiful, and she is also very clever. The princess and noble were continually offering to marry her. These visitors, because they were rich and noble, knew how to make a fine show before the lady by arriving at her house with expensive presents and finely dressed servants. But Bassanio was poor. He could not afford to buy fine presents. He was afraid that the lady would not like him because he was poor, and so she would refuse to marry him. Bassanio went to Antonio and told him of his difficulty. The lady, he said, seems to enjoy my visits, and I think she might be willing to marry me if only I could make myself look as rich as the other visitors. Would you help me to do this, Antonio, by lending me 3,000 ducats? You understand, the currency is ducats. And Bassanio, you understand, he loved Antonio, and because of that he went to Antonio for money. As he needed money, he understood that the rich lady was interested in him, and if he could show her that Bassanio was also rich, she would accept him to marry. I'm always ready to help you, Bassanio, said Antonio, but I have no money to spare just now. All my ships are at sea, but I shall have plenty of money when they come back. So I'll borrow the money from Shylock. The Shylock, you understand, Shylock was the moneylender. Shylock was the Jew. He was a miser, the best known moneylender in Venice. He was not liked by people even when he used to lend money, because he was not a good personality. Because he was a headman who demanded a high rate of interest and showed no mercy to those who could not pay back the money borrowed from him. Now Shylock hated Antonio, partly because Antonio showed his dislike for Shylock's hard character, but chiefly because Antonio himself often lent money without asking any interest on it. And that, of course, spoiled Shylock's business. So you understand, if you are a good person, still you can be a bad person in the eyes of a bad person. Because you understand, Anthony was a very rich man and he was a very kind man. He used to lend people money, and it was without the interest, and that was because of it Shylock's business was not doing well, because Shylock's business was based on the interest. As Shylock was charging a lot of interest, people would not borrow from him because they could get money from Antonio, the kindest man in this play, in this drama by William Shakespeare. So Shylock waited for the lady when he could harm Antonio, not knowing that Shylock hated him in this way. Antonio went with his friend Bassanio to borrow 3,000 ducats. I shall be able to pay it back with interest, said Antonio to Shylock, as soon as my ships come to port. As you know, they are now at sea and will shortly arrive home with valuable cargoes. At first, Shylock seemed unwilling to lend the money because you understand Shylock never liked Antonio. So the more Antonio was a good person, the less Shylock would like. Shylock was diametrically opposite. That is the reason. So a good person cannot be good in the eyes of a bad person. The same thing has happened here. Antonio was such a good person and Shylock was such a bad person. So even when Antonio was a good person, Shylock did not like him. There was also another reason. I would come to that in later, right? At first, Shylock seemed unwilling to lend the money. Your ships are maybe destroyed. This is reasonable. By storms before they reach Venice, Shylock said, and then you'll be unable to repay the money. This is also reasonable. So Shylock in the beginning said something reasonable to convince Antonio that he is not an enemy to Shylock. But this was a pretension. He was pretending to be good to Antonio. But as they talked together, the clever wicked Jew thought of a way of harming Antonio. Why should I lend you any money? He asked, turning to Antonio, when you were always calling me a dog and treating me with scorn. However, I'm willing to be friends with you, and as you sometimes lend money without asking any interest, I will do the same for you. So, to show that I too can be friendly and generous. But this is a trick, you understand. Shylock was trying to get an opportunity to punish, to harm Antonio. And this was a nice trick, and it was really difficult for Antonio to understand. And at the same time, Antonio was a very kind person. That's why he wanted to help his friend Bassanio, especially when he was in love with Portia, the richest lady, the most beautiful lady, so he should really help Bassanio. It's not just for the first time. He has lent him money, he has helped him in a number of ways. And Tony was very surprised to hear the money lender's kind offer. Then Shylock went on, just for a joke. Antonio will agree that if you do not repay me, I shall take a pound of your flesh to be cut from any part of your body that I choose. Antonio laughed and agreed and seemed much amused by the whole business because Antonio was sure that his ships were coming back. As soon as the ships were back, he would easily pay back the money. 3 ducats is nothing in the sense of as Antonio was very rich. Bassanio told Antonio not to agree to what Shylock asked, but Antonio treated the whole matter as a joke. So Bassanio is not a bad character, he's a very good character. He is a confident here. You understand, confident. E is added at the end. So he suggested Antonio not to get money from Shylock because there might be a trick. He got the idea, and Antonio treated the whole matter as a joke. So you understand, sometimes silly some things become very, very precious. And precious something can turn very silly. So the 3 men went to a lawyer and signed a paper to say that if Antonio did not repay Shylock the money within 3 months, Shylock was to be allowed to cut off a pound of flesh from any part of his body he chose. Antonio then took the money from Shylock and gave it to Bassanio. Bassanio now bought some fine clothes, collected some servants, and prepared to visit Belmont where Portia lived. Now Portia's father, before he died, had thought of a plan for helping his daughter to choose the right husband. He had had 3 small boxes made of different metals. The first was of gold, the second was of silver, and the last was of lead. One of them contained the picture Portia. It was her father's wish that his daughter should marry the first man, who rightly guessed in which box the picture lay. So this is going to be a very interesting story, one, as you understand. Before the death of Portia's father, he had 3 boxes. You understand? One, it was made of metals. The other one, the first one was of gold. The second one was of uh, silver, and the third one was of lead. So you come to the story, it will be so much interesting. But each man must promise that if he guessed wrong, he would never ask any woman to marry him. So this is a severe punishment if you try the luck of yours. You can choose one of the boxes, and if you win, you can win Portia. You can be the happiest man in the world. But if you do not win the race, what will happen? You cannot ask for marriage to any woman. If no one wants to marry you, you cannot ask for marriage. So that you have to remain. You have to remain forever as bachelor. That was a terrible punishment at the same time. Many men, when they heard about this, went away without daring to guess at all. So it is not unreasonable, you understand. If somebody fails, then it will be a terrible disaster in his life. He cannot marry a woman. Of the few who had tried, none had so far guessed right. One of them, a prince from Morocco, had chosen the golden box because he thought that only gold was good enough to hold the picture of anyone so beautiful as Portia. But when he opened it, he found a terrible picture of death inside. So he went sadly away. The next man to guess was the Prince of Aragon in Spain. He liked the look of the silver box. On this box were written the words, "Who chooses me will get what he deserves." These words pleased him, for he thought to himself it would be a good world if everyone got what he deserved. And if I do not deserve to win this lady, I have no right to marry her. But surely I do deserve her. Let me see. He opened the silver box, but when he looked in, he saw a picture not of the beautiful Portia, but of a mad fool. So he too went away disappointed. So the father of Portia was very intelligent. He even put some tricks when he placed those boxes. I understand in one of the boxes there would be a photo of his own daughter Portia. If somebody guesses properly, if he chooses the one that is having the photo of Portia, can marry Portia. That would be the best in his life. But it's not easy. So the first one thought that gold is the best, so he should choose gold, and he chose, and he found that no, there was no picture of Portia in the box. The second one found that, yeah, whatever you deserve, you can get. Something precious has been written on the second box, and he chose it, and then he found that no, there was no picture of Portia. It was the picture of the death. After several men had come and gone away, disappointed, Portia heard that Bassanio had arrived. There came with him a friend called Gratiano, who was in love with Nerissa, Portia's maid. So Portia, you understand, Portia's maid's name is Nerissa, and somebody else, he is Gratiano, he was in love with Nerissa. So he had come to ask her to marry him, just as Bassanio had come to ask Portia. When Bassanio arrived, Portia received him very kindly, for she liked him far more than any of the other men, and she was ready to marry him. So she felt worried and anxious to think that he, like the others, would probably choose the wrong box. Indeed, she begged him to wait for a while before choosing, but when Bassanio said that he would prefer to do it at once, he too was shown the three boxes of gold, silver, and lead. Bassanio considered for a long time before choosing either the gold or the silver box must be the right one. He thought, but no, so many peoples and things try to make themselves look fine and beautiful when they are really ugly and bad. I'll choose the lead one. Portia watched him, so he had a philosophical conception. As people always look fine and beautiful, and there was some contradictory thinking as he chose the box. Bassanio chose the box with the philosophical point of view. He chose the box of lead. he chose the worst one. Lead is the third one, right? The second one is silver, and the first one is gold. So he chose the lead one. Portia watched him make the right guess with joy and delight, and with equal joy, Bassanio opened the box and saw inside it the picture of Portia. Bassanio then turned to Portia to see if she too was pleased, and he was still not quite certain that she wished to have him for her husband. At once Portia told him of her love for him. She then took a ring off her finger and gave it to Bassanio, telling him that if he ever gave the ring away, their love would come to an end. So this is in Bangla Nilkon. That's what happened in Muslim society. If you wanna get married to a girl, you go to the girl's house and you arrange a program. You go with your elders, others, and when you find that she is your type, you like her, when you have decided to marry her, then as a token of love, as a kind of pre engagement, he gives a ring, right? So the same thing has happened, but that's opposite. The lady Portia gave Bassanio the ring instead, and she told that if you lose this, the relationship will come to an end. So this is serious. Bassanio accepted the ring with joy and said that he would guard it as if it were his life. In this way, Portia and Bassanio promised to be faithful to each other. Bassanio's friend Graciano and Portia's maid Nerissa were in the room at the same time and had seen all that had happened. Graciano now came forward and said that he wished them joy in their marriage and that he and Nerissa wished to be married at the same time, wishing them much happiness. Portia and Bassanio agreed at once. But now something happened which made them all very much troubled. A messenger, he came bringing a letter to Bassanio from his friend, the merchant Antonio. As Bassanio read the letter, Portia saw him turn pale. The letter contained bad news. She asked quickly what was the matter. So Bassanio told her about the money he had borrowed and how Antonio had promised to give Shylock a pound of his flesh if he could not repay him by a certain day. This letter showed that all Antonio's hopes had been disappointed. My ships are lost, he wrote, and I have now to pay the Jew according to our bonds. And since in paying him it is impossible that I should live, I much wish to see you at my death. The messenger who brought the letter then told them that the day when Antonio was supposed to repay the 3,000 ducats had passed, and that Shylock had sent again and again to the Duke of Venice, who dealt with such matters, asking him for justice. And so poor Antonio was now in prison, waiting for his trial. When Portia heard this unhappy story, she wanted to give all the help she could. She said that she would repay several times these 3,000 ducats and that were owed to Shylock, and she asked Bassanio to go and help his friend as soon as possible. Only they must be married before anything else. So all four went at once to church and were married. Bassanio and Bresciano then left their wives and went straight back to Venice. But as soon as they had left, Portia began to think how she could save Antonio's life because she loved her husband. She decided to do everything she could to help his friend. She therefore sent a letter to a cousin of hers, a well-known and clever lawyer, asking for advice. She asked him to send her his counselor's robes, which he wore when he gave counsel in a court of justice. Her friend Dr. Bellerio at once sent her the robes and advised her in what a counselor should do in court and in what way she would defend Antonio. You get the plan here. It's getting really interesting. The more the time passes, the drama becomes more enjoyable. Suspense and all these dramatic elements are cool in this play. Shakespeare dealt with it properly. Portia at once decided what she would do to her friends and servants. She said that she was going to spend a few quiet days in a monastery until her husband returned. She had a quick decision. She tricked. She did not let her husband understand what she was going to do. It's really fascinating, full of suspense and dramatic elements. Then she called her friend Nerissa and told her about her plan. They both dressed themselves in men's clothes and started for Venice. Meanwhile, Bassanio and Bresciano had reached Venice and had entered the court of justice, for the trial was due to begin. When the time came, the Duke of Venice entered and took his seat. Antonio, the prisoner, was brought in, and the Duke called for Shylock. When Shylock entered, the Duke begged him to give up his cool demand and not to take a pound of Antonio's flesh. But Shylock would not listen to the Duke. It was an opportunity for Shylock to punish severely Antonio. When you take 1 pound of flesh from Antonio's body, what's going to be the situation in his head? Can you understand? Can die? What will happen? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Then Bassano offered to pay him not only the 3,000 ducats, but twice the amount if he would let Antonio go. But Antonio is a business. Shylock is a businessman. He wanted to gain a lot of money. It's true. But the thing is that as he was humiliated by Antonio, as he did not like Antonio, as his business was suffering a lot because of Antonio's lending money without any interest, Shylock is now not interested in money. He is interested in punishing Antonio. Such a cruel punishment Shylock is going to administer on Antonio. Still, Shylock could not be merciful. The laws of Venice, he said, allow me to demand a pound of Antonio's flesh because he has not repaid the money on the right day. Now, thought Shylock to himself, at last I shall have my revenge on this proud Christian merchant for all the scorn he has shown me. And he laughed to himself. Now it happened that the Duke had sent for a learned lawyer to advise him about this difficult case, and the man he had written to was the same Dr. Bellaria, who had given his advice and his ropes to Portia. Before giving judgment in the case, the Duke decided to wait for the lawyer. It may be, he thought, that so learned a man can find a way of saving Antonio's life. Just as he decided this, a man came, saying that he brought a letter from Dr. Bellario, and the doctor wrote that he was ill and he could not therefore come to the court himself. So he asked that young friend of his, a Dr. Balthazar. So you understand, Dr. Balthazar in disguise of, right? That's very interesting. It's actually, you understand, the wife of Bassanio, Portia. She has disguised as a doctor and Balthazar. He might be allowed to come inside. The Duke gave his permission and invited the young doctor to come in. The clerk who brought the letter to the Duke was really Nerissa. So you understand, Nerissa, the maid servant, the maid of Portia. She has disguised as the clerk, and she brought the letter to the Duke. Portia's maid dressed as a man. He had probably guessed who Dr. Balthazar was, although he was surprised to see how young the learned lawyer was. The Duke invited him to defend Antonio. Portia, for it was she, turned to Shylock and begged him to show mercy to Antonio. Mercy, she said, brings a blessing to him who shows mercy and to him who receives. But Shylock could not listen to her. চোরে শোনে না ধর্মের কাহিনী. A thief doesn't listen to the religious sermons. This is the fact. Shylock was much more vengeance. He did not want money from Antony. He was in lieu of lending money. He wanted to punish Antonio. That was his motive. Very villainous. All I ask, he said, is the payment of what is owed to me. But ask Portia, can he not pay back the sum you lent him? Bassanio quickly said he can pay this and more. so I can pay it for him 10 times over. He begged the counselor to set the law aside this once. To do a great right, said he, do a little wrong. So this is something interesting. To do a great right, do a little wrong. So this is absolutely fascinating. He begged the counselor to set the law aside this once. So it should be postponed for some other time. Why? Because to do a great thing, one should do a little wrong. No, answered Portia, this cannot be done, for if we set the laws aside now, others may follow this bad example, and the country will suffer if it neglects its own laws. Sherlock was delighted when he heard this answer, and he thought that he would now win his case. He praised the wise young judge and laughed at Antonio, and this is so funny, so irony of situation, you understand. Shylock heard something from and Portia, and it was in favor of Shylock, but actually it was not in favor of Shylock. You understand what's going to happen next? That was a trick. Portia then asked to see the written agreement. Having read it, she agreed that Shylock could claim his pound of flesh. So she turned towards Antonio and commanded him to bare his breast. At this, Shylock, who was sure at last that he would have his revenge upon Antonio, called out, "Oh, noble judge, oh, excellent young man!" But he was wrong. He was going to be ruined very soon, you understand? Antonio, thinking that he was about to die, said goodbye to his friend Bassanio and begged him to tell Portia why he had died. Bassanio, in his unhappiness, replied that there was nothing he would not give, his own life or even his wife, to save Antonio if he could. Now, said Portia to Shylock, take what is owed to you. Cut from this man's breast the pound of flesh. Shylock, his knife ready in his hand, moved forward to cut out Antonio's heart. "Oh, learned judge," he said. "Oh, learned judge," said to Antonio. "Come, prepare." But before he could drive his knife into Antonio's body, Portia stopped him. "Stop, stop. Wait," she said. "There is something else. This bond allows you no drop of water, no drop of blood. The words say clearly a pound of flesh, but no drop of blood. But if in cutting it you spill one drop of blood, then by the laws of Venice all your property shall belong to the state of Venice." You understand? When you pass a stool, when you move bowel, when you go to toilet, it's not just a stool, it's also urine that goes out. So as the paper says that 1 pound flesh, he cannot spill any drop of blood. This is reasonable. Shylock stood quite still. He was so surprised and angry that he could scarcely move. "Is that the law?" he asked. Portia offered to show him the law on the subject, by which those who caused blood to flow unlawfully were punished by having their property taken by the state. You cannot shed blood from anyone's body. If you do, you have to be punished severely. All the property of yours will go to the state. Now it was Gratiano, seeing how angry Shylock was, who cried out, "Oh, learned judge, take note, you a learned judge." The upside down, dramatically opposite what Shylock thought of the jazz and what comes out. Now you understand, dramatically opposite. Shylock then remembered Bassanio's offer to pay back the money 3 times over. "I take your offer then," he said to Bassanio. "Pay back 3 times what I lent Antonio about and let him go." It's not possible. You understand? The time is over, as Shylock did not give mercy to Antonio. Now he should not be given mercy. A terrible disaster is befalling upon Shylock. Bassanio is delighted. He was delighted at Antonio's escape from death. At once held out the money to Shylock, but Portia stopped him. "Shylock should have the pound of flesh and nothing more. As he was insisting on the pound of flesh, that was all he could get out of Antonio's body and nothing more. "Oh, Jew!" cried Bresciano, laughing at him again. "An upright judge, a learned judge. Come, take your pound of flesh, Shylock," said Portia. "A pound, no more, no less, but no drop of blood. Why do you hesitate?" Shylock now thought that he might at least get back the money he had lent. "Give me back the sum which I lent and let me go." "Here it is," said Bassanio, offering him 3,000 ducats. But no, Portia would not allow that. A little while ago Shylock had refused the money when he had been offered to him. So now he should have nothing. The angry Shylock was about to leave the court when Portia called him back. "Wait," she said. "Wait, there is a law which says that if a foreigner plans to kill a Venetian citizen, half his property goes to that citizen and the other half to the state, and the Duke may order any other punishment he thinks right. So kneel to him and beg for mercy." So that's the thing. Even in Bangladesh, you see, when somebody who is sentenced to death by the uh, upper court, Supreme Court, he can or she can appeal, and it will depend on the mercy of the president of Bangladesh. If the president pardons, then he can get exempted. Otherwise, no, he will be hanged to death. He will be punished to death, sentenced to death. Shylock, who a little time before had refused all mercy to Antonio, could not now expect mercy for himself, but the Christian Duke was more merciful than the Jewish moneylender. "That you may see how different is our spirit from yours," he said. "I give you your life before you ask for it, but half your wealth goes to Antonio and half to the state." And now the good merchant showed mercy to the Jew. "I will not take my share of Shylock's wealth," he said, "but Shylock shall become a Christian." Shylock was also forced to sign a paper leaving his money after his death to his daughter Jessica and to her husband Lorenzo. This is interesting, you understand. Antonin is a very, very good character, such a noble person. He did not want the half of the money that Shylock was going to give him. He rather gave it to his own daughter, that is Shylock's daughter. Her name is Jessica, and to Jessica's husband Lorenzo, who was also Antonio's friend. So you understand, Jessica, the daughter of Shylock, and Jessica is the wife of Antonio's friend Lorenzo. A little time before that, Jessica had run away from her father and married Lorenzo secretly. For this, Shylock had threatened to leave none of his money to her. So even when Jessica is Shylock's daughter, as Jessica ran away, eloped with Lorenzo, Shylock said that he would not give any money to his daughter. For this, Shylock had threatened to leave none of his money to her. The Jew now knew that he must obey Portia's and Antonio's commands. "I am ill," he cried. "Let me go home. Send the paper after me, and I'll sign it." So the Duke let Shylock go, and the trial came to an end. During the trial, though, they were extremely surprised to see how young and wise the lawyer was. Neither Bassanio nor any of his friends suspected he was Portia. So cleverly had she changed her voice and her appearance. So she was in disguise. Bassanio's wife Portia, she was so clever. She was such a good lady, such an intelligent lady, you understand? She changed so cleverly, so perfectly her voice, and she changed her appearance at the same time. When the trial was over, Bassanio and Antonio wished to show how thankful who they were to the judge. "Please accept the 3,000 ducats due to Shylock," begged Antonio. But Portia would not accept the money. When Bassanio again pressed her to accept something from him, Portia thought that she would play a joke upon her husband. "Since you praise me so much," she said, "give me your gloves." And when Bassanio took off his gloves and showed his hand as a sign of your love, "That ring on your finger." When Portia asked him for his ring, Bassanio could not help drawing his hand away, for it was the right given him by Portia, and she promised to marry him when he had promised never to give it away. So it is interesting as Portia gave Bassanio the ring, and she told as long as you keep it, the relationship is intact. If you lose it, if you take it away, if you give it away, then the relationship between Portia and her husband Bassanio will be over. So now Portia is having a trick. She is now having fun just to make it more interesting. What happened when she saw the ring? She asked for it as he was insisting for giving something to Portia. So at first he pretended that so much a present was not worth giving, and then when Portia asked again, he said that it was his wife who had made him promise never to give it away. That, replied Portia, is a common excuse of men when they do not want to give a present. Your wife will not be angry with you long when she knows how well I have deserved the ring. Portia with Nerissa, her clerk, was about to leave them when Antonio persuaded Bassanio to give up the ring, and Bassanio, ashamed to seem unthankful, gave the ring to Portia. Nerissa also cleverly managed to persuade Graciano to give her the ring which he had received from her and had promised never to give away. After leaving Venice, Portia and Nerissa went as quickly as possible to Belmont in order to arrive before their husbands. When they had arrived, they at once took off their maid's clothes, dressed themselves as usual, and sat down to wait for the return of their husbands. Soon afterwards, the two entered with Antonio. Bassanio at once introduced Antonio to his wife. This is the friend, he said, to whose help I owe so much. While Portia was welcoming Antonio to her house, they saw Graciano and Nerissa curling in a corner of the room. What? Cried Portia, curling already. What is the matter? It is about a ring which Nerissa gave me. Graciano explained, the ring which had the words cut on it, love me and leave me not. I'm not angry because the ring was valuable, replied Nerissa, but because Graciano promised faithfully to keep it, and now he has given it away to a judge's clerk. He should never have done that. Portia was now determined to have her joke against her husband. Of course, Graciano was wrong to give away his wife's first present. I too gave my husband a ring and made him promise to keep it. If he had given that ring away, I should indeed be angry with him. So you understand they are now playing another trick. Nerusa asked for the ring, but the ring is lost. The ring has been given away to the jars, and this is so interesting. And as they were quarreling, Portia saw, and she also told that she also gave a ring to her husband on condition that as long as the ring would be with him, there would be relationship between these two. If he lost it or left it or gave away to someone else, then the relationship will come to an end. Something like last year I gave it away. So what happens, there is a very beautiful English songs, right? Last Christmas, right? Then Bresciano said, but Bassano did give his ring away too. He gave it to the counselor who asked him for it. And then the boy, his assistant, begged me for my ring. When she heard this, Portia pretended to be very angry and asked Bassanio, what ring did you give? Not that one, I hope, which you received from me. Bassanio, feeling very unhappy to see his wife so angry, had to admit that he had given the ring away. If only you understood how unwillingly I gave the ring and to whom I gave it and why I gave it, you would excuse me for giving me. But Portia still pretended to be angry and said that doubtless Bassanio had given it to some woman. Bassanio, thinking that he had really hurt Portia's feelings, said that he had given it to the lawyer because he was so grateful to him for saving Antonio's life. If you had been there, he said, I think that you would have begged me to give him the ring. Then Antonio turned to Portia and said, I'm the unhappy cause of these quarrels. Do not take this so seriously, replied Portia. Then taking the ring from her bag, she said, hence then give him this ring and tell him to keep it better than he kept the other. So Antonio passed the ring to Bassanio, who looked at it and was extremely surprised to see that it was the ring he had given away. Portia then showed her husband the letter from Dr. Bellaria, and so he learned that the clever lawyer was really Portia, his wife. Yet it was his surprise and delight to find that his own wife, by her courage and wisdom, had saved the life of his dear friend Antonio. Shortly afterwards, Antonio learned good news about his own affairs. Portia handed him some letters which had just arrived. From this, Antonio learned that the ships which he thought were lost had returned to Venice with valuable cargoes. So you understand, it's happy ending. You understand, the ships were also safe; they were not lost in the sea. They came back, so all the money Antonio also got back with even a lot of profit. And here you see Portia made a fun with her husband Bassanio, and at one point she gave the ring. She showed the ring that, yeah, you did well. You should have given the ring to the person. So I was the same person. She also showed the letters that it was Dr. Balthazar, right? Bellario. Antony was a wealthy man again, and thus ended the strange story of the merchant of Venice in good news to the merchant and laughter between wives and husbands over the joke of the rings. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.